Question 1. Market research demonstrates that a competitor is planning a significant product launch that could impact EVE Energy's market share. A junior employee, without authorization, has accessed and shared preliminary details of this competitor's launch plans with a senior manager at EVE Energy. The senior manager is considering how to best utilize this information to adjust EVE Energy's upcoming product development strategy and bidding process for a major contract. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the senior manager at EVE Energy? Option A. Discard the information and instruct the junior employee to forget about it, without any further internal reporting or action, to avoid any potential complications. Option B. Publicly disclose the competitor's launch plans to create market uncertainty and deter their launch, while simultaneously preparing EVE Energy's bid based on this knowledge. Option C. Immediately inform the relevant internal departments, e.g., legal, compliance, about the unauthorized access and the information received, and refrain from using the competitor's launch details in any strategic decisions or bids until a formal review and guidance are provided. Option D. Use the competitor's launch details to preemptively adjust EVE Energy's product development roadmap and pricing strategy to gain a competitive advantage in the upcoming contract bid. Correct answer is C. Immediately inform the relevant internal departments, e.g., legal, compliance, about the unauthorized access and the information received, and refrain from using the competitor's launch details in any strategic decisions or bids until a formal review and guidance are provided. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an employee of EVE Energy to navigate a conflict between potential business gain and ethical obligations, specifically concerning the disclosure of sensitive information. The pressure to secure a new contract could tempt an individual to overlook or downplay ethical considerations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that EVE Energy's actions align with its stated values and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to EVE Energy's internal policies and relevant industry regulations regarding the disclosure of competitive information. This means refraining from using the prematurely obtained market research data to gain an unfair advantage in the bid. This approach is correct because it upholds principles of fair competition and integrity, which are fundamental to ethical business conduct and often reinforced by industry-specific codes of conduct and general principles of good corporate governance. It prevents EVE Energy from being perceived as engaging in unethical or potentially illegal practices, thereby protecting its reputation and long-term business relationships. An incorrect approach would be to leverage the prematurely obtained market research data to tailor EVE Energy's bid. This is ethically problematic because it implies the data was acquired through means that may not be transparent or fair to competitors. It could also violate confidentiality agreements if the data was obtained from a source that had a duty to protect it. Furthermore, it undermines the principle of a level playing field in competitive bidding processes. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the data entirely without any internal review or consideration of its implications. While this avoids direct misuse, it misses an opportunity to understand potential market shifts or competitor strategies, which could be detrimental to EVE Energy's strategic planning if the data, even if obtained ethically, contains valuable insights. However, the primary ethical failure lies in the *use* of improperly obtained information. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately report the individual who obtained the data to external regulatory bodies, without first consulting EVE Energy's internal compliance department or legal counsel. While whistleblowing can be necessary in certain circumstances, a premature external report without internal due diligence could be an overreaction, potentially damaging internal trust and failing to allow EVE Energy to address the situation internally and compliantly. The professional reasoning process should involve 1. Identifying the ethical dilemma and potential conflicts. 2. Consulting EVE Energy's internal policies and relevant industry guidelines. 3. Seeking advice from the compliance or legal department. 4. Acting in a manner that upholds integrity, fairness, and regulatory compliance. Question 2. Analysis of a situation where a senior analyst at EVE Energy, while reviewing confidential financial projections, discovers a significant, undisclosed positive development that is highly likely to impact the company's stock price once released. The analyst has a personal investment in EVE Energy stock. What is the most appropriate course of action for the analyst to take? Option A. Immediately report the confidential information and the potential conflict of interest to EVE Energy's compliance department. Option B. Share the confidential information with a close friend who is also an investor in the stock market, suggesting they consider investing in EVE Energy. Option C. Continue with their regular duties, assuming the information will be handled by others and not directly acting on it themselves. Option D. Execute a trade to buy more EVE Energy stock before the information is publicly disclosed to maximize personal profit. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the confidential information and the potential conflict of interest to EVE Energy's compliance department. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an EVE Energy employee due to the potential conflict between personal financial interests and the company's ethical obligations. The employee has access to material, non-public information that could significantly impact EVE Energy's stock price. Acting on this information for personal gain would constitute insider trading, a serious violation of securities regulations and EVE Energy's internal code of conduct. The challenge lies in navigating this situation ethically and legally, ensuring that personal interests do not compromise professional integrity or expose the company to regulatory scrutiny. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the potential insider information to the designated compliance officer or legal department at EVE Energy. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate reporting of potential securities law violations and uphold the ethical principle of avoiding conflicts of interest. By disclosing the information, the employee fulfills their duty to the company and regulatory bodies, allowing EVE Energy to take appropriate steps to manage the situation and prevent any breaches of insider trading laws. This proactive disclosure demonstrates a commitment to transparency and ethical conduct, safeguarding both the employee and the company. Incorrect approaches analysis. Acting on the information to buy or sell EVE Energy stock before it becomes public knowledge is a direct violation of insider trading regulations. This approach prioritizes personal financial gain over legal and ethical responsibilities, leading to severe penalties for the individual and potential reputational damage and legal action for EVE Energy. Discussing the information with friends or family who might then trade on it, even if the employee themselves does not trade, is also a form of illegal tipping. This constitutes passing on material, non-public information to others for their benefit, which is equally prohibited under insider trading laws. It creates an indirect but still punishable breach of trust and regulation. Ignoring the information and continuing with normal business operations without reporting it is also an ethically and regulatorily unsound approach. While it might seem like avoiding direct involvement, it fails to address a known potential violation. This inaction could be interpreted as complicity or negligence, especially if the information later surfaces and it's discovered the employee was aware of it and did nothing. It neglects the duty to report and protect the company's interests and regulatory standing. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the energy sector, particularly those at companies like EVE Energy, must operate with the highest standards of integrity. When faced with information that could be construed as material and non-public, the decision-making process should prioritize adherence to regulatory frameworks and ethical codes. This involves a clear understanding of what constitutes insider information and the legal ramifications of its misuse. A robust professional decision-making process includes 1. Recognizing the potential ethical and legal implications of the information. 2. Consulting internal policies and relevant regulations. 3. Seeking guidance from designated compliance or legal personnel. 4. Acting transparently and proactively to report any concerns. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not driven by personal gain, but by a commitment to legal compliance and professional responsibility. Question 3. Benchmark analysis indicates that EVE Energy is in the final stages of negotiating a significant supply contract with a major new client. You are the lead negotiator for EVE Energy. During the process, you discover that the primary decision-maker at the potential client company is a close personal friend with whom you have a long-standing relationship. This relationship is not publicly known. How should you proceed? Option A. Immediately disclose your personal relationship with the client's decision maker to your direct manager and the EVE Energy Compliance Department, and seek their guidance on how to proceed with the negotiation process. Option B. Inform the client's decision maker that you will be withdrawing from the negotiation due to a potential conflict of interest, without informing EVE Energy Management. Option C. Proceed with the negotiation, but avoid any personal contact with the client's decision maker and focus solely on the contractual terms. Option D. Continue with the negotiation process as planned, leveraging your personal relationship discreetly to ensure the contract is secured for EVE Energy. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose your personal relationship with the client's decision maker to your direct manager and the EVE Energy Compliance Department, and seek their guidance on how to proceed with the negotiation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate business interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to secure a significant contract could tempt an individual to overlook potential conflicts of interest or to engage in practices that, while not explicitly illegal, could be perceived as unethical or damaging to the company's reputation and stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions align with EVE Energy's commitment to integrity and compliance. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal stakeholders at EVE Energy. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and adherence to ethical guidelines. By seeking guidance and approval from management or the compliance department, the individual ensures that any decision made regarding the contract is informed, ethical, and compliant with EVE Energy's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach prioritizes integrity and risk mitigation over short-term gains. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the contract negotiations without disclosing the personal relationship with the key decision maker at the potential client. This failure to disclose a potential conflict of interest violates fundamental ethical principles of honesty and fairness. It creates an environment where decisions could be influenced by personal bias rather than the best interests of EVE Energy, potentially leading to reputational damage, loss of trust, and even legal repercussions if the undisclosed relationship is discovered and deemed to have improperly influenced the outcome. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the relationship and leverage it indirectly to secure the contract. This is a deliberate act of deception and a severe breach of ethical conduct. It not only undermines EVE Energy's integrity, but also exposes the company to significant risks, including accusations of bribery or undue influence, which could have severe legal and financial consequences. A further incorrect approach would be to withdraw from the negotiation process entirely without any communication or explanation. While this might seem like a way to avoid conflict, it is not a proactive or professional solution. It fails to leverage internal resources for guidance and could result in a missed business opportunity for EVE Energy without a clear understanding of the ethical considerations involved. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Identify potential conflicts of interest. Recognize any personal relationships or external interests that could influence professional judgment. 2. Disclose proactively. Immediately inform relevant internal parties, manager, compliance department, about the potential conflict. 3. Seek guidance and approval. Request clear direction on how to proceed, ensuring any actions taken are approved and aligned with company policy and regulations. 4. Document all communications and decisions. Maintain a record of discussions and approvals to ensure accountability and transparency. 5. Prioritize integrity and compliance. Always ensure that actions uphold ethical standards and regulatory requirements, even if it means forgoing a short-term advantage. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that EVE Energy has identified significant inefficiencies in its battery production line that could impact future output and profitability. The head of communications is concerned about the potential negative impact on the company's stock price and public image, and is considering issuing a press release that focuses solely on recent technological advancements and downplays the production issues. As a member of the EVE Energy compliance team, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Draft a press release that acknowledges the identified production inefficiencies, explains their potential impact, and outlines the corrective actions EVE Energy is implementing, ensuring full compliance with disclosure regulations. Option B. Prepare a press release that vaguely alludes to operational adjustments being made without specifying the nature or impact of the production inefficiencies. Option C. Issue a press release that highlights EVE Energy's recent technological breakthroughs and market growth, omitting any mention of the production inefficiencies to avoid negative market reaction. Option D. Advise the head of communications to delay any public statement until the production issues are fully resolved and the impact is quantifiable, thereby avoiding any premature or potentially inaccurate disclosures. The correct answer is A. Draft a press release that acknowledges the identified production inefficiencies, explains their potential impact, and outlines the corrective actions EVE Energy is implementing, ensuring full compliance with disclosure regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose potentially negative information. EVE Energy, like any publicly scrutinized entity, faces pressure to maintain its reputation. However, the regulatory framework governing financial reporting and corporate conduct demands transparency and accuracy. The challenge lies in navigating the fine line between strategic communication and misleading stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any public statement aligns with factual data and regulatory disclosure requirements, preventing the creation of a false impression. The correct approach involves a commitment to accurate and timely disclosure, even when the information is unfavorable. This means acknowledging the identified process inefficiencies and their potential impact on future performance, while also outlining concrete steps being taken to rectify the situation. This approach is rooted in principles of corporate governance and regulatory compliance, which prioritize investor protection and market integrity. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit of regulations that require companies to provide a true and fair view of their financial position and operational performance. Transparency in this context builds trust with stakeholders and demonstrates responsible management. An incorrect approach that downplays or omits the identified inefficiencies would be a failure to comply with disclosure obligations. This could be interpreted as misleading investors and the market, potentially violating regulations that mandate the disclosure of material information. Such an approach prioritizes short-term reputational management over long-term ethical conduct and regulatory adherence, creating a risk of significant penalties and reputational damage if the truth is later revealed. Another incorrect approach, that of selectively disclosing only positive aspects of the process analysis while ignoring the negative findings, also constitutes a form of misrepresentation. This selective disclosure creates an incomplete and therefore misleading picture for stakeholders. It fails to meet the ethical standard of providing a comprehensive and balanced view, which is crucial for informed decision-making by investors and other interested parties. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory framework, including disclosure requirements and ethical codes of conduct. Professionals should always prioritize accuracy and completeness in their communications. When faced with potentially negative information, the process should involve 1. A factual assessment of the information's materiality. 2. Consultation with legal and compliance departments to understand specific disclosure obligations. And 3. The development of a communication strategy that is transparent, accurate, and compliant, while also outlining remedial actions. Question 5. Research into an upcoming, unannounced product launch at EVE Energy has revealed significant positive market potential that is not yet public knowledge. As an employee with access to this information, you are considering whether to purchase additional EVE Energy stock before the official announcement. Option A. Discuss the potential product launch and its market impact with close friends and family, suggesting they consider investing in EVE Energy. Option B. Report the material non-public information to EVE Energy's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading until the information is publicly disclosed. Option C. Continue with your existing personal investment strategy without making any changes, assuming the information will not influence your decisions. Option D. Purchase EVE Energy stock immediately, anticipating a significant price increase upon the product launch announcement. The correct answer is B. Report the material non-public information to EVE Energy's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading until the information is publicly disclosed. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate business interests with its ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core conflict lies in potentially leveraging insider information for personal gain, which is a direct violation of trust and market integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate the temptation of financial advantage against the severe consequences of unethical conduct. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the material non-public information to the appropriate compliance or legal department within EVE Energy and refraining from any trading based on this information. This upholds the principle of fair markets and prevents insider trading, which is strictly prohibited by financial regulations. By disclosing the information internally, the individual acts responsibly, allowing EVE Energy to manage the situation appropriately and preventing personal enrichment through unfair advantage. This aligns with the ethical duty of loyalty to the employer and the regulatory imperative to maintain market integrity. An incorrect approach would be to trade EVE Energy stock based on the anticipated positive news. This constitutes insider trading, a serious offense that undermines market fairness and can lead to severe penalties, including fines and imprisonment. It violates the trust placed in employees by the company and the public. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with friends or family who might then trade on it. This is also a form of insider trading, as it facilitates the illegal dissemination and use of material non-public information, making the individual complicit in the offense. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the information and continue with personal trading plans as if nothing was learned. This fails to address the ethical and regulatory implications of possessing such information, potentially leading to an unintentional violation if subsequent trading is perceived as influenced by the insider knowledge, even if not explicitly acted upon. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in managing sensitive information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing the nature of the information, understanding its potential impact, and immediately consulting internal policies and compliance procedures. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and seek guidance from the appropriate internal authorities. Question 6. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a minor but persistent quality control issue in a new battery component could lead to a significant cost saving for EVE Energy in the short term by expediting production. However, there is a small but non-zero risk of this issue causing a performance degradation in a small percentage of finished products over their lifespan. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for the EVE Energy employee responsible? Option A. Immediately report the quality control issue and its potential implications to relevant stakeholders and management, recommending a pause in production until the issue is fully understood and mitigated, even if it impacts short-term cost savings. Option B. Discreetly adjust quality control parameters to mask the issue, allowing production to continue at the accelerated pace while hoping the performance degradation does not become apparent. Option C. Inform management of the cost savings but omit any mention of the potential quality control issue, focusing solely on the positive financial outlook. Option D. Proceed with production, as the cost savings are substantial and the risk of performance degradation is statistically low, assuming the issue will likely not manifest significantly. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the quality control issue and its potential implications to relevant stakeholders and management, recommending a pause in production until the issue is fully understood and mitigated, even if it impacts short-term cost savings. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing potential financial gains against ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet performance targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that short-term financial benefits do not compromise the long-term integrity and reputation of EVE Energy, as well as its adherence to the EVE Energy hiring assessment tests stipulated regulatory framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the EVE Energy hiring assessment tests guidelines, even if it means foregoing an immediate financial advantage. This aligns with the ethical principle of integrity and the regulatory requirement to conduct business in a manner that is fair and compliant. Specifically, the EVE Energy Hiring Assessment Tests framework emphasizes honesty and accurate representation of information. Therefore, disclosing the potential issue, even if it delays a project or reduces immediate profit, upholds these core principles and avoids potential future penalties or reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to proceed without full disclosure, hoping the issue resolves itself or is not discovered. This constitutes a failure to uphold the ethical duty of honesty and transparency, which is a cornerstone of professional conduct and likely a specific requirement within the EVE Energy Hiring Assessment Tests guidelines. Such an action could lead to significant reputational damage, regulatory sanctions, and a breach of trust with stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to subtly alter data or reports to mask the issue. This is a direct violation of integrity and honesty, and would likely be explicitly prohibited by the EVE Energy Hiring Assessment Tests Ethical Code, leading to severe consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant ethical principles and regulatory requirements. They should then assess the potential consequences of each possible action, considering both short-term and long-term impacts on all stakeholders. When faced with a conflict between financial gain and ethical/regulatory obligations, the latter must always take precedence. Seeking guidance from supervisors or ethics committees, if available, is also a crucial step in navigating complex dilemmas. Question 7. Comparative studies suggest that maintaining robust ethical frameworks is crucial for sustainable business growth. At EVE Energy, a senior procurement manager discovers that a long-standing personal friendship exists with a key executive at a prominent supplier company that is currently bidding for a significant contract. The manager is involved in the evaluation committee for this contract. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the procurement manager to take? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation as normal, confident in their ability to remain objective, and only disclose the friendship if specifically asked about potential conflicts. Option B. Disclose the personal friendship to the relevant internal committee and recuse themselves from all aspects of the supplier evaluation and decision-making process for this specific contract. Option C. Delay disclosing the friendship until after the contract has been awarded to avoid any perception of interference during the selection process. Option D. Subtly steer the evaluation towards the supplier with whom they have a personal connection, believing it will benefit EVE Energy due to their familiarity with the supplier's capabilities. The correct answer is B. Disclose the personal friendship to the relevant internal committee and recuse themselves from all aspects of the supplier evaluation and decision-making process for this specific contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate business interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core conflict lies in the potential for a perceived conflict of interest and the need for transparency and fairness in decision-making processes that could impact stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing pressures without compromising EVE Energy's integrity or violating relevant regulations. The correct approach involves proactively disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the relevant internal committee and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes directly related to the supplier's contract. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to principles of good corporate governance. Specifically, this aligns with general principles of corporate ethics and potential regulatory expectations around conflicts of interest, which often mandate disclosure and recusal to ensure impartiality and prevent undue influence. By stepping aside, the individual upholds the integrity of the procurement process and protects EVE Energy from accusations of favoritism or impropriety. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the supplier evaluation without disclosure risks violating ethical standards and potentially regulatory requirements concerning conflicts of interest. This could lead to a perception of bias, undermining trust among stakeholders, and potentially leading to legal or reputational damage for EVE Energy. Another incorrect approach of subtly influencing the evaluation process in favor of the known supplier, even if the supplier is objectively good, is ethically unsound and professionally damaging. circumvents the established procurement procedures and introduces bias, which is a direct contravention of fair dealing principles and could have severe regulatory consequences if discovered. A further incorrect approach of delaying the disclosure until after a decision has been made is also problematic. While it might seem like a way to avoid immediate scrutiny, it still represents a failure of timely transparency and can be seen as an attempt to conceal a potential conflict, which is ethically and often legally unacceptable. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. First, identify any potential conflicts of interest, however minor they may seem. Second, consult EVE Energy's internal policies and any applicable regulatory guidelines regarding conflicts of interest. Third, if a conflict is identified, err on the side of caution by disclosing it promptly and seeking guidance on recusal or other appropriate measures. Fourth, prioritize transparency, fairness, and the best interests of EVE Energy and its stakeholders over personal or perceived advantages. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates that a recent internal safety audit at EVE Energy has uncovered a significant, previously undisclosed defect in a key component used in a widely distributed product line. This defect, if not addressed, poses a moderate but credible risk of failure, potentially leading to product malfunction and customer dissatisfaction. The audit findings are not yet public. As a mid-level manager involved in the audit, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Proceed with implementing a fix for the defect internally without immediately disclosing the issue, assuming the fix will be completed before any potential failure occurs. Option B. Immediately inform senior management and the legal department about the audit findings and recommend a comprehensive disclosure plan to regulatory bodies and the public. Option C. Continue with the audit and gather more data to fully quantify the risk before reporting it, to avoid causing undue alarm. Option D. Discuss the findings informally with trusted colleagues to gauge their opinions on the severity before taking formal action. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform senior management and the legal department about the audit findings and recommend a comprehensive disclosure plan to regulatory bodies and the public. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate business interests with the ethical obligation to disclose material information that could impact investor decisions. Core conflict lies between the potential for short-term financial gain through continued operations and the long-term reputational and legal risks associated with withholding crucial safety information. Careful judgment is required to navigate this ethical tightrope, ensuring compliance with regulatory disclosure requirements and upholding investor trust. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to senior management and the legal department, and ensuring that all necessary disclosures are made in accordance with relevant regulations. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and adherence to legal and ethical standards. Specifically, under the EVE Energy Hiring Assessment Test's implied regulatory framework, which we assume aligns with general principles of corporate governance and securities law, companies have a duty to disclose material non-public information that could affect the price of their securities. Failing to do so can lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and damage to the company's reputation. Prompt and transparent communication with regulatory bodies and the market is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to delay reporting the findings or to attempt to downplay their significance. This could be driven by a desire to avoid negative publicity or to protect the company's stock price in the short term. However, such actions would constitute a breach of disclosure obligations and could be interpreted as an attempt to mislead investors. This failure to act ethically and legally can result in significant legal repercussions, regulatory investigations, and a loss of investor confidence, which is far more damaging in the long run than the initial negative news. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on internal discussions without involving the appropriate legal and compliance functions. This bypasses established protocols for handling material information and risks inadequate or legally unsound decision-making. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Identifying the ethical and regulatory implications of the situation. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and applicable laws and regulations. 3. Escalating the issue to the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as legal counsel, compliance officers, and senior management, to ensure a coordinated and informed response. 4. Prioritizing transparency and timely disclosure to all relevant parties, including regulatory authorities and the investing public, as mandated by law and ethical principles. Question 9. Regulatory review indicates that an employee at EVE Energy is aware of a significant unannounced product launch that is expected to positively impact the company's stock price. The employee's spouse is considering making an investment and asks the employee for their opinion on EVE Energy stock. What is the most appropriate course of action for the EVE Energy employee? Option A. Suggest the spouse research EVE Energy stock, implying that there might be positive developments on the horizon. Option B. Advise the spouse that they cannot discuss EVE Energy stock due to company policy and regulatory requirements regarding material non-public information. Option C. Discuss the potential positive impact of the upcoming product launch on EVE Energy's stock price in general terms, stating it is expected to be a significant event. Option D. Express general optimism about EVE Energy's future prospects without mentioning specific details of the product launch. The correct answer is B. Advise the spouse that they cannot discuss EVE Energy stock due to company policy and regulatory requirements regarding material non-public information. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's business objectives with the ethical imperative to maintain market integrity and prevent insider trading. The individual's knowledge of EVE Energy's upcoming significant product launch, which is not yet public, constitutes material non-public information. Acting on this information, even indirectly through a family member, could lead to severe regulatory penalties for both the individual and EVE Energy, as well as reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to avoid any appearance or reality of impropriety. The correct approach involves refraining from any communication that could be construed as tipping off a third party about the impending product launch. This means not discussing the launch details, its potential impact on EVE Energy stock price, or any other material non-public information with family members or anyone outside of authorized internal channels. This aligns with the principles of market fairness and the prohibition against insider dealing, as mandated by financial regulations designed to protect investors and maintain confidence in the capital markets. Specifically, it upholds the duty to safeguard confidential information and prevent its misuse for personal or familial gain. An incorrect approach would be to share general positive sentiment about EVE Energy's future prospects with the family member without disclosing specific details of the launch. While seemingly innocuous, this could still be interpreted as a subtle hint or encouragement to invest, especially if the family member subsequently makes a profitable trade. This blurs the line between general optimism and the conveyance of material non-public information. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest the family member research EVE Energy stock without mentioning the specific reason for the recommendation. This is a form of indirect tipping. The family member, knowing the individual works at EVE Energy and is suggesting they look into the stock, might infer that there is a specific positive development on the horizon, even if not explicitly stated. This still leverages the individual's privileged position. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the potential stock price impact of the launch in vague terms, such as, "It's going to be big." This, too, constitutes tipping. The vagueness does not negate the fact that the information is material and non-public, and the discussion could influence the family member's investment decisions based on information they are not privy to through public channels. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of what constitutes material non-public information. If an employee possesses such information, the default position must be silence and strict adherence to confidentiality policies. Any communication that could even remotely suggest an investment advantage based on this information should be avoided. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and consult with EVE Energy's compliance department or legal counsel. The primary consideration should always be the integrity of the market and adherence to regulatory requirements. Question 10. Consider a scenario where EVE Energy's research and development team discovers a significant flaw in a new battery component during late-stage testing, just weeks before a crucial contract signing with a major automotive manufacturer. This flaw, if not addressed, could lead to premature battery degradation, but the team believes it can be rectified within a few months. The R&D lead is concerned about the potential impact on EVE Energy's stock price if the flaw is disclosed now, potentially jeopardizing the contract. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for EVE Energy? Option A. Immediately disclose the discovered flaw to the relevant regulatory authorities and the public, while also informing the automotive manufacturer of the issue and the proposed remediation plan. Option B. Disclose the flaw to the automotive manufacturer only, framing it as a minor technical challenge that will be resolved before mass production, without informing the public or regulators. Option C. Issue a general statement about ongoing product development and quality assurance efforts without specifically mentioning the discovered flaw, hoping it will be resolved before it becomes a material issue. Option D. Conceal the flaw from the public and the automotive manufacturer until the contract is signed and the component is in production, then address the issue internally. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the discovered flaw to the relevant regulatory authorities and the public, while also informing the automotive manufacturer of the issue and the proposed remediation plan. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate business interests with the ethical obligation to disclose potentially material information to investors. The pressure to secure a significant contract could lead to overlooking or downplaying negative findings, creating a conflict between commercial goals and corporate transparency. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all stakeholders, particularly investors, receive accurate and timely information. The correct approach involves promptly and accurately disclosing the identified quality control issue to the relevant regulatory bodies and the market. This aligns with the principles of fair disclosure and investor protection, which are fundamental to maintaining market integrity. Specifically, regulations governing listed companies typically mandate the disclosure of any information that could reasonably be expected to have a material effect on the company's share price. By proactively reporting the issue, EVE Energy demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, thereby safeguarding its reputation and long-term investor confidence. An incorrect approach would be to delay or omit the disclosure of the quality control issue. This could be driven by a desire to avoid negative market reaction or to secure the contract without immediate repercussions. However, such an action would constitute a breach of disclosure obligations, potentially leading to severe penalties from regulators, loss of investor trust, and significant reputational damage. Furthermore, withholding material information can be interpreted as market manipulation or insider trading if individuals with knowledge of the issue trade EVE Energy shares before the information becomes public. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the issue in a vague or misleading manner, attempting to minimize its perceived impact. This tactic, while seemingly a compromise, still fails to meet the standard of full and fair disclosure. Regulators and investors expect clear, concise, and unambiguous communication regarding material events. Obfuscation or downplaying the severity of the quality control problem would likely be seen as an attempt to deceive the market, leading to similar negative consequences as outright omission. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Identify the potential issue and its materiality. 2. Consult internal legal and compliance teams to understand regulatory obligations. 3. Assess the potential impact on investors and the market. 4. Prioritize transparency and timely disclosure over short-term commercial gains. 5. Document all decisions and communications related to the issue. 6. Seek guidance from senior management and the board of directors when necessary. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a senior role at EVE Energy has, in their previous role, gained access to material non-public information regarding a significant upcoming product launch by a key competitor. This information, if acted upon, could substantially impact the stock price of both EVE Energy and its competitor. The candidate is aware of this potential impact and is considering their next steps before officially joining EVE Energy. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach for the candidate to take? Option A. Trade EVE Energy stock based on the anticipated positive impact of the competitor's product failure, or short the competitor's stock based on the anticipated negative impact of their launch. Option B. Keep the information confidential and proceed with joining EVE Energy, assuming that their personal actions will not be traceable to the information they possess. Option C. Wait until after officially joining EVE Energy to disclose the information, hoping that the product launch has already occurred and the stock price impact has materialized, thus mitigating any perceived conflict of interest. Option D. Immediately disclose the material non-public information to EVE Energy's compliance department and their prospective hiring manager, and recuse themselves from any discussions or decisions related to the competitor until EVE Energy has had an opportunity to assess and act upon the information. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the material non-public information to EVE Energy's compliance department and their prospective hiring manager, and recuse themselves from any discussions or decisions related to the competitor until EVE Energy has had an opportunity to assess and act upon the information. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a candidate's personal financial interests and their duty to act in the best interest of EVE Energy, the potential employer. The candidate possesses non-public information that could significantly impact the stock price of a competitor. The core ethical dilemma lies in deciding whether to leverage this information for personal gain before joining EVE Energy, or to disclose it appropriately and recuse themselves from any related decision-making processes. Careful judgment is required to uphold integrity, avoid insider trading violations, and maintain EVE Energy's reputation. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the information to the appropriate internal stakeholders at EVE Energy and recusing oneself from any discussions or decisions related to the competitor. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance from the outset. Specifically, by disclosing the information, the candidate is acting transparently and allowing EVE Energy to manage the situation appropriately, thereby preventing potential insider trading violations under relevant securities laws. This proactive disclosure also signals integrity and trustworthiness, crucial qualities for any employee, especially in a company like EVE Energy, which likely operates in a highly regulated industry. An incorrect approach would be to trade EVE Energy's stock based on this information, as this constitutes insider trading and is a serious violation of securities regulations. This action would not only expose the candidate to severe legal penalties, but also damage EVE Energy's reputation and potentially lead to regulatory investigations. Another incorrect approach would be to remain silent and not disclose the information, hoping to avoid any conflict. This inaction is also problematic, as it allows a potential conflict of interest to persist and could lead to the candidate making decisions that inadvertently benefit from the undisclosed information, or conversely, harm EVE Energy by not acting on crucial competitive intelligence. Furthermore, failing to disclose could be seen as a breach of trust and a lack of due diligence. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, integrity, and regulatory compliance. When faced with a potential conflict of interest or the possession of material non-public information, the first step should always be to identify the conflict. The next step is to consult relevant company policies and regulatory guidelines. If a conflict exists, the professional should then disclose the situation to their supervisor or the designated compliance officer. Finally, they should follow the guidance provided, which typically involves recusal from relevant activities and ensuring no personal gain is derived from the information. Question 12. The investigation demonstrates that a junior engineer at EVE Energy, while conducting routine system diagnostics, inadvertently accessed a confidential competitor's product development roadmap. This roadmap contains proprietary information that could significantly impact EVE Energy's future product strategy if exploited. The engineer, realizing the sensitivity of the information, is now contemplating how to proceed. Option A. Delete all records of the access and pretend the incident never happened to avoid any potential repercussions. Option B. Attempt to discreetly analyze the competitor's roadmap to identify potential strategic advantages for EVE Energy before reporting it. Option C. Share the information with a trusted senior manager outside of the official reporting channels to get their opinion on the best course of action. Option D. Immediately report the accidental access to EVE Energy's compliance department and follow their guidance on handling the situation. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the accidental access to EVE Energy's compliance department and follow their guidance on handling the situation. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a company's desire to secure a competitive advantage and the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of sensitive information. The pressure to act quickly and decisively can lead to overlooking crucial regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with legal and ethical responsibilities. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the suspected breach to the relevant internal compliance team and potentially external regulatory bodies, as dictated by EVE Energy's internal policies and applicable regulations. This upholds the principle of transparency and allows for a controlled, compliant investigation. Specifically, it aligns with the spirit of data protection and corporate governance frameworks that mandate prompt disclosure of potential security incidents to prevent further harm and ensure accountability. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining stakeholder trust and avoiding severe penalties. An incorrect approach that involves attempting to rectify the situation internally without reporting it risks violating data privacy laws and internal company policies. This could lead to accusations of a cover-up, further damaging EVE Energy's reputation and potentially incurring significant legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the incident due to its perceived minor nature, is ethically unsound and legally negligent. It fails to acknowledge the potential for even small breaches to escalate or to have significant downstream consequences, thereby disregarding the duty of care owed to customers and stakeholders. A third incorrect approach, which is to immediately leak the information to gain a competitive edge, is highly unethical and illegal, constituting a severe breach of confidentiality and potentially insider trading regulations, leading to severe disciplinary action and legal penalties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Recognizing the potential ethical and legal implications of the situation. 2. Consulting internal policies and relevant regulations. 3. Seeking guidance from compliance or legal departments. 4. Acting transparently and promptly to report any suspected breaches. 5. Documenting all actions taken. Question 13. The analysis reveals that EVE Energy is in urgent need of a critical battery component and has identified a potential new supplier. However, preliminary due diligence has uncovered credible reports suggesting the supplier may have questionable labor practices and a history of environmental noncompliance. The procurement team is under pressure to finalize the deal quickly to avoid production delays. Option A. Inform the supplier of the allegations and, upon their denial, proceed with the contract without further verification, assuming their denial is sufficient. Option B. Proceed with the supplier after conducting a thorough, independent audit of their labor and environmental practices, and if issues are found, work collaboratively with the supplier to implement corrective actions to meet EVE Energy standards before finalizing the contract. Option C. Immediately sign the contract with the supplier to secure the components, deferring any detailed investigation into their practices until after the immediate production needs are met. Option D. Halt all discussions with the supplier and immediately seek an alternative source, without further investigation into the validity of the reports or potential for remediation. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the supplier after conducting a thorough, independent audit of their labor and environmental practices, and if issues are found, work collaboratively with the supplier to implement corrective actions to meet EVE Energy standards before finalizing the contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate business needs with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to secure a critical component supplier, especially when facing potential production delays, can create a temptation to overlook or downplay ethical concerns. However, maintaining integrity and adhering to regulatory frameworks are paramount for EVE Energy's reputation, legal standing, and sustainable growth. Careful judgment is required to navigate the conflict between expediency and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and due diligence, even if it means a temporary setback in securing the supplier. This approach upholds EVE Energy's commitment to ethical sourcing and compliance. Specifically, it involves conducting a thorough investigation into the supplier's labor practices and environmental impact, and engaging in open communication with the potential supplier about EVE Energy standards. This aligns with general principles of corporate social responsibility and ethical business conduct, which are increasingly codified in various regulatory frameworks and industry best practices that govern international business operations, including those relevant to the energy sector. By proactively addressing potential issues, EVE Energy demonstrates a commitment to responsible business practices, mitigating future risks and building trust with stakeholders. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking the red flags and proceeding with the supplier without further investigation would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct due diligence would violate ethical principles of responsible sourcing and could expose EVE Energy to significant reputational damage, legal liabilities, and potential sanctions if the supplier is found to be in breach of labor or environmental laws. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately terminate discussions without a proper investigation, might be overly cautious and could lead to the loss of a potentially valuable supplier if the concerns are minor or can be rectified. While caution is important, a balanced approach that seeks to understand and address issues is generally preferred over outright dismissal without cause. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify the ethical dilemma and potential conflicts of interest. Second, gather all relevant information, including any red flags or concerns raised. Third, consult applicable company policies, codes of conduct, and relevant regulatory guidelines. Fourth, assess the potential risks and consequences of each possible course of action. Fifth, seek advice from legal counsel or ethics officers if the situation is complex. Finally, choose the course of action that best upholds ethical principles, regulatory compliance, and the long-term interests of EVE Energy. Question 14. Risk assessment procedures indicate that an EVE Energy employee has discovered information during their work that, if acted upon privately, could lead to significant personal financial gain, but also potentially expose EVE Energy to regulatory penalties or reputational damage. The employee is considering how to proceed. Option A. Use the information to make a personal investment that is likely to yield substantial financial returns. Option B. Discreetly try to influence a relevant EVE Energy business decision to indirectly benefit from the information without making a direct report. Option C. Report the discovered information immediately to EVE Energy's compliance department through the established internal reporting channels. Option D. Discuss the information with trusted friends and family outside of EVE Energy to get their advice on how to best leverage it. The correct answer is C. Report the discovered information immediately to EVE Energy's compliance department through the established internal reporting channels. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an EVE Energy employee because it involves a potential conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The employee has discovered information that could benefit them financially, but also potentially harm EVE Energy's reputation or lead to regulatory scrutiny if not handled appropriately. The professional challenge lies in navigating this situation with integrity, adhering to EVE Energy's internal policies and relevant regulations, and making a decision that prioritizes ethical conduct and compliance over personal advantage. Careful judgment is required to discern the appropriate course of action that upholds professional responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the discovered information through the designated internal channels at EVE Energy, such as the compliance department or a confidential whistleblower hotline. This is the right professional practice because it aligns with the company's commitment to transparency, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance. By reporting, the employee fulfills their duty to inform the company of potential risks or improprieties, allowing EVE Energy to investigate and take necessary corrective actions. This approach safeguards the company's interests, protects its reputation, and ensures adherence to any applicable laws or industry guidelines that mandate reporting of such information. It demonstrates a commitment to corporate governance and ethical responsibility. Incorrect approach is analysis. Choosing to exploit the information for personal financial gain without reporting it to EVE Energy is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action constitutes a breach of trust, potentially violates insider trading regulations, if applicable to the information discovered, and could lead to severe disciplinary action, including termination and legal penalties. Prioritizes personal enrichment over professional integrity and the well-being of the company. Attempting to discreetly leverage the information to influence a business decision in a way that benefits the employee indirectly, without formal reporting, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach skirts the edges of ethical conduct and could be construed as a conflict of interest or an attempt to manipulate company processes for personal advantage. It undermines the fairness and transparency of EVE Energy's operations and may still violate internal policies or regulatory expectations regarding disclosure and conflicts of interest. Seeking advice from external parties outside of EVE Energy's official reporting mechanisms, such as friends or family who may not understand the specific regulatory or ethical landscape EVE Energy operates within, is also a flawed approach. While seeking advice is not inherently wrong, doing so without first engaging EVE Energy's internal compliance or legal departments risks misinterpreting the situation, inadvertently disclosing sensitive information inappropriately, or receiving advice that does not align with EVE Energy's specific policies and regulatory obligations. This bypasses the established channels designed to ensure proper handling of such matters. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should first consult EVE Energy's internal code of conduct and relevant policies regarding conflicts of interest, reporting procedures, and ethical behavior. They should then utilize the designated internal reporting channels to disclose the information promptly and accurately. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from the compliance or legal department is crucial. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, integrity, and adherence to established protocols, ensuring that personal interests do not compromise professional responsibilities or regulatory compliance. Question 15. To address the challenge of potentially possessing material non-public information regarding an upcoming significant product development at EVE Energy that could impact its stock price, what is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for an employee? Option A. Assume the information is not significant enough to warrant any action and continue with normal duties. Option B. Make a personal investment in EVE Energy stock before the information is publicly disclosed. Option C. Discuss the information with close friends and family who are also investors. Option D. Immediately report the information to EVE Energy's compliance department for guidance and appropriate action. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the information to EVE Energy's compliance department for guidance and appropriate action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. EVE Energy, as a publicly traded entity, has a duty to its shareholders, but this duty is constrained by legal and ethical frameworks designed to ensure fair market practices and prevent insider trading. The core tension lies in the potential for personal gain through privileged information versus the responsibility to act with integrity and uphold market confidence. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict, prioritizing ethical conduct and regulatory adherence over short-term personal benefit. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the potential insider information to the appropriate compliance department or legal counsel within EVE Energy. This action demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of market integrity and the prohibition of insider dealing, which are fundamental to financial market regulations. By escalating the issue internally, the individual ensures that EVE Energy can take appropriate steps to manage the information, prevent any potential misuse, and comply with disclosure obligations. This proactive measure protects both the individual and the company from regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to use the information to make a personal investment decision before it is publicly disclosed. This action constitutes insider trading, a serious regulatory offense. It violates the principle of fairness in the market by giving an unfair advantage to those with non-public information. Such behavior can lead to severe penalties, including fines, disgorgement of profits, and even imprisonment, as well as significant damage to EVE Energy's reputation and investor trust. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with colleagues or friends who might be able to trade on it. This is also a form of insider dealing, as it facilitates the illicit use of privileged information. It breaches confidentiality and extends the potential for market abuse, further undermining market integrity and exposing both the individual and those they inform to regulatory scrutiny and penalties. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the information and take no action, assuming it is not significant enough to warrant reporting. This passive stance is also professionally unacceptable. It fails to uphold the duty of care and the responsibility to act in the best interests of the company and the market. By not reporting, the individual allows a potential regulatory breach to go unaddressed, which could still lead to negative consequences for EVE Energy if the information later surfaces and its prior existence was known. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a clear understanding of ethical codes and regulatory requirements. When faced with potentially material non-public information, the immediate priority should be to avoid any action that could be construed as insider trading. This involves a commitment to transparency and fair dealing. The established protocol for handling such information within EVE Energy, which typically involves reporting to a designated compliance or legal team, should be followed without deviation. This ensures that the information is managed according to regulatory mandates and internal policies, safeguarding market integrity and the company's reputation. Question 16. The review process indicates a significant discrepancy in the reported inventory valuation for a key product line at EVE Energy, which, if not corrected, could materially misstate the company's upcoming quarterly financial results. You have identified the source of the error, but are aware that correcting it will negatively impact the reported profit margin for the period. Your direct supervisor has suggested a minor adjustment to the valuation methodology that would obscure the full extent of the error without explicitly correcting it, stating it's a common practice to smooth out minor fluctuations. What is the most appropriate course of action for you to take? Option A. Proceed with the correction of the inventory valuation error without informing your supervisor or any other department, assuming the correction will be discovered later. Option B. Implement the supervisor's suggested adjustment to the valuation methodology to avoid negatively impacting the reported profit margin. Option C. Immediately report the discrepancy and your concerns about the proposed adjustment to EVE Energy's head of compliance and the audit committee. Option D. Discuss the discrepancy with your immediate colleagues to gauge their opinion on how to proceed before taking any action. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the discrepancy and your concerns about the proposed adjustment to EVE Energy's head of compliance and the audit committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with the ethical obligation to disclose material information accurately and without delay. The pressure to present a positive financial outlook can create a conflict of interest, where an employee might be tempted to downplay or delay reporting negative developments. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all stakeholders, including investors and regulators, receive timely and truthful information. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the identified discrepancy to the appropriate senior management and legal/compliance departments within EVE Energy. This ensures that the issue is addressed promptly and transparently, adhering to the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. Specifically, this aligns with the ethical duty of honesty and integrity and the regulatory requirement for accurate financial reporting. By proactively reporting the issue, the employee upholds their professional responsibility and protects EVE Energy from potential regulatory penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to fix the discrepancy internally without proper escalation or documentation. This could involve manipulating accounting entries or delaying the recognition of expenses, which constitutes fraudulent financial reporting and a clear violation of ethical and regulatory standards. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the discrepancy, hoping it will resolve itself or go unnoticed. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold professional responsibilities, potentially leading to significant legal and financial repercussions for EVE Energy and the individual. A third incorrect approach is to disclose the discrepancy only to a select few colleagues without involving the proper channels. This can lead to misinformation, inconsistent communication, and a failure to address the issue systematically, undermining the company's commitment to transparency and compliance. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. This involves 1. Identifying the issue and its potential impact. 2. Consulting relevant company policies and codes of conduct. 3. Escalating the issue through the designated reporting lines, ensuring all relevant parties are informed. 4. Documenting all communications and actions taken. 5. Seeking guidance from legal and compliance departments when uncertainty exists. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made in a responsible, ethical, and compliant manner. Question 17. What factors determine the appropriate course of action for an EVE energy hiring manager when a close personal relationship exists with a candidate being assessed, considering the EVE energy hiring assessment test's regulatory framework? Option A. The perceived impact of the relationship on the assessment outcome and the obligation to disclose the relationship to the relevant EVE energy assessment oversight body. Option B. The candidate's overall qualifications and the manager's belief that they can remain objective despite the personal relationship. Option C. The length of the personal relationship and the potential for future professional collaboration between the manager and the candidate. Option D. The manager's personal assessment of the candidate's suitability for the role and the likelihood of the relationship being discovered by other EVE energy employees. The correct answer is A. The perceived impact of the relationship on the assessment outcome and the obligation to disclose the relationship to the relevant EVE energy assessment oversight body. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing a company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to meet targets can lead to overlooking potential compliance issues, creating a conflict between performance and integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that short-term gains do not compromise the company's reputation or lead to legal repercussions. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the EVE energy hiring assessment test's regulatory framework. This means proactively identifying and disclosing any potential conflicts of interest, even if they seem minor. This approach is right because it upholds the principles of integrity and fairness mandated by the assessment's guidelines, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on merit without undue influence. It aligns with the ethical imperative to maintain a level playing field and prevent any perception of impropriety. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying or omitting information about a potential conflict of interest is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the regulatory framework's emphasis on disclosure and honesty. Such an action could be interpreted as an attempt to mislead or manipulate the assessment process, violating the trust placed in the candidate. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the assessment without any consideration for the potential conflict, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and ethical awareness. This failure to acknowledge and address the conflict directly contravenes the spirit of fair assessment and could lead to biased outcomes, undermining the credibility of the hiring process. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical dilemmas and conflicts of interest. They should then consult the relevant regulatory framework and internal company policies to understand their obligations. If a conflict is identified, the next step is to disclose it promptly and seek guidance on how to proceed. This proactive and transparent approach ensures that decisions are made ethically and in compliance with all applicable rules and guidelines, safeguarding both the individual's professional standing and the company's integrity. Question 18. Operational review demonstrates that a significant discrepancy exists between the reported energy output of a new EVE energy facility and the actual measured output, potentially indicating a misstatement of performance metrics. The immediate supervisor, who is responsible for the facility's reporting, has indicated that this is a minor issue that will be corrected in the next reporting cycle and has advised against raising it further to avoid disrupting the upcoming investor relations presentation. Option A. Attempt to reconcile the discrepancy by adjusting the measurement data to align with the reported figures before the investor relations presentation. Option B. Immediately report the discrepancy and supporting documentation to EVE Energy's internal compliance department, irrespective of the supervisor's advice. Option C. Discuss the discrepancy with the supervisor and agree to monitor the situation informally without formal reporting. Option D. Accept the supervisor's assurance that the issue will be corrected and wait for the next reporting cycle to see if it is resolved. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the discrepancy and supporting documentation to EVE Energy's internal compliance department, irrespective of the supervisor's advice. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing EVE Energy's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to meet targets can lead to overlooking potential compliance issues, creating a conflict between performance and integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that short-term gains do not compromise the company's reputation or lead to legal repercussions. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the EVE Energy's internal code of conduct and relevant regulatory guidelines. This means immediately escalating the observed discrepancy to the appropriate internal compliance or legal department, providing all necessary documentation, and cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation. This approach is ethically sound and legally prudent because it upholds the principles of good corporate governance, ensures that potential violations are addressed proactively, and protects EVE Energy from future penalties or reputational damage. It aligns with the expectation that employees act with integrity and report any suspected wrongdoing, as often mandated by company policies and industry best practices. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy, hoping it goes unnoticed or resolves itself. This is ethically unacceptable as it constitutes a failure to act with due diligence and potentially facilitates or conceals a compliance breach. It also carries significant regulatory risk, as regulatory bodies often expect proactive reporting and remediation. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to fix the discrepancy internally without proper reporting, especially if this involves manipulating data or records. This is unethical as it involves deception and can be construed as obstruction of compliance processes. It also exposes EVE Energy to severe penalties if discovered, as it demonstrates a deliberate attempt to circumvent regulatory oversight. A third incorrect approach would be to report the issue to a superior who is implicated in the discrepancy, without escalating it further to an independent compliance function. This risks the issue being suppressed or mishandled, failing to ensure an objective review and resolution. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical or regulatory concerns. This involves a thorough understanding of EVE Energy's policies and relevant regulations. When a discrepancy is identified, the next step is to gather objective evidence. The framework then dictates escalating the concern through the appropriate channels, prioritizing those channels that ensure independence and objectivity, such as a dedicated compliance or legal department, or a confidential whistleblowing hotline if available. This ensures that the issue is addressed by those with the authority and responsibility to investigate and rectify it, safeguarding both the company and its stakeholders. Question 19. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of energy output readings that are lower than the reported operational figures for EVE Energy's primary production facility. As a junior analyst in the operations department, you have identified this recurring variance. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Adjust the reported operational figures to align with the monitoring system's readings to ensure consistency. Option B. Directly confront the operations manager responsible for reporting the figures, accusing them of data manipulation. Option C. Ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor calibration issue that will likely resolve itself. Option D. Immediately escalate the discrepancy to your direct supervisor, providing all collected data and observations for further investigation. The correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the discrepancy to your direct supervisor, providing all collected data and observations for further investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational efficiency and potential cost savings with the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of data used for critical decision-making, particularly in a regulated industry like energy. The conflict arises from a potential discrepancy between observed performance and reported performance, which could have implications for regulatory compliance, financial reporting, and stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action without prematurely making accusations or overlooking potential systemic issues. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation into the discrepancy. This means gathering all relevant data, consulting with technical experts within EVE Energy, and comparing the monitoring system's output against established operational parameters and historical records. The justification for this approach lies in the fundamental ethical principles of honesty, integrity, and due diligence. Specifically, it aligns with the expectation that employees will act in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders by ensuring accuracy and transparency in all operations. This methodical investigation is crucial for identifying the root cause of the discrepancy, whether it be a system malfunction, a data entry error, or a more serious issue. It also upholds the principle of fairness by avoiding hasty conclusions and allowing for a complete understanding of the situation before any corrective actions are taken. An incorrect approach would be to immediately report the discrepancy as a deliberate act of fraud or misconduct without proper investigation. This failure stems from a breach of due diligence and fairness. It could lead to unwarranted accusations, damage to employee morale, and potential legal repercussions if the initial assumption is incorrect. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy, hoping it resolves itself or is insignificant. This failure violates the ethical duty of care and the responsibility to report potential issues that could impact the company's operations or compliance. Ignoring such discrepancies can lead to larger problems down the line, including regulatory penalties and financial losses. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to fix the data to match the monitoring system's output without understanding the cause. This is a direct violation of data integrity principles and could be construed as an attempt to conceal a problem, leading to further ethical and regulatory breaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document the observed discrepancy. 2. Consult internal policies and procedures regarding data integrity and reporting. 3. Initiate a fact-finding process, gathering all relevant information and consulting with appropriate internal resources, e.g., IT operations compliance. 4. Analyze the findings objectively to determine the root cause. 5. Based on the findings, determine the appropriate course of action, which may include system correction, further investigation, or reporting to relevant authorities. 6. Maintain clear and transparent communication throughout the process, adhering to confidentiality requirements. Question 20. Benchmark analysis indicates that EVE Energy has identified a potential quality issue with a recently launched product line that could impact consumer safety and investor confidence. The marketing department is concerned about negative press and is advocating for a communication strategy that emphasizes the product's benefits while subtly downplaying the severity of the quality concern. The legal and compliance departments are reviewing the relevant disclosure requirements, which approach best upholds EVE Energy's ethical and regulatory obligations. Option A. Issue a statement that focuses on the financial impact of the quality issue on projected earnings, without explicitly detailing the nature of the quality concern itself, to manage investor expectations regarding profitability. Option B. Focus all external communications on the product's positive market reception and sales figures, while initiating an internal investigation to address the quality issue without any immediate public disclosure until a complete resolution is achieved. Option C. Issue a public statement that acknowledges a minor production anomaly, highlights the product's innovative features, and assures customers of EVE Energy's commitment to quality, while deferring detailed information about the anomaly to internal reports. Option D. Immediately issue a comprehensive public statement detailing the nature of the quality issue, the potential risks, and the immediate steps EVE Energy is taking to investigate, rectify, and communicate with affected customers and stakeholders, in line with all applicable regulatory disclosure requirements. The correct answer is C. Issue a public statement that acknowledges a minor production anomaly, highlights the product's innovative features, and assures customers of EVE Energy's commitment to quality, while deferring detailed information about the anomaly to internal reports. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose potentially negative information. EVE Energy, as a publicly traded entity, operates under stringent regulatory frameworks that mandate transparency and accurate reporting. The challenge lies in balancing stakeholder interests, shareholders expecting profitability and growth, and the public and regulators expecting honesty and responsible corporate behavior. Careful judgment is required to navigate this delicate balance without compromising ethical standards or legal obligations. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and accurate disclosure, even if it carries short-term reputational risks. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. By proactively addressing the quality issue and communicating the steps being taken to rectify it, EVE Energy demonstrates accountability and a commitment to its customers and investors. This approach fosters long-term trust and mitigates the potential for more severe repercussions from delayed or misleading disclosures. Specific regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial reporting and product safety, often mandate timely and accurate reporting of material information. Ethically, this approach upholds the principle of honesty and avoids deception. An incorrect approach would be to downplay or omit the quality issue from public statements. This failure stems from a misunderstanding of regulatory obligations and ethical duties. Regulatory bodies typically require disclosure of material information that could impact investor decisions or public safety. Concealing or misrepresenting such information can lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage that far outweighs any short-term benefit. Ethically, this approach violates the principle of truthfulness and could be seen as an attempt to mislead stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the financial implications of the quality issue without acknowledging the underlying problem. While financial prudence is important, it should not come at the expense of addressing the root cause and informing stakeholders about the actual situation. This approach risks appearing evasive and may not satisfy regulatory requirements for a comprehensive explanation of the issue and its resolution. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the situation, including its potential impact on stakeholders and regulatory compliance. This should be followed by consultation with legal and compliance departments to understand specific disclosure obligations. The decision should prioritize transparency, accuracy, and ethical conduct, even when faced with potential negative consequences. A proactive and honest communication strategy, supported by concrete actions to address the issue, is generally the most robust and professionally sound path.